I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum!
Astro Radio Z is a horror, cult, exploitation film podcast by filmmakers, critics, musicians, journalists, and fans for the film obsessed. Here is your host, Derek Carey.
So, are you ready to talk about some slow motion?
I'm ready to talk about a former football coach that was in a shot on video film. Oh, wait, is that not the right Michael Shanahan that's in this film?
No.
Oh, that's a different.
No, it's not the right one. Even though half of the dudes in this movie look like they came from the NFL. Which is an interesting little side note that we may discuss at some point.
Ooh, way to tease me.
There's a lot of buff dudes that like hanging out with each other.
Yeah.
And not like hanging out with the women that they're with.
Kind of noticed that, especially dime store Lionel Richie.
This is going to be fun, Mark. Well, folks, here we are. Welcome to Astro Radio Z number 120. We're here. Mark and I have come back. I hope you have your VCRs ready. We're ready to jump back into the shot on video well with David Pryor's Sledgehammer. Now, half of the reason I do these episodes is because I always enjoy finding out what Mark thinks about these really strange, obscure, shot-on-video horror films. Now, Sledgehammer has the pedigree of possibly being, and we have kind of debunked this back in our previous episode with Boarding House, is Sledgehammer sometimes is acknowledged as being the first direct-to-video, shot-on-video horror film. Now, Boarding House is a weird story, and we kind of discussed it where, you know, it was shot on video, it was held back, it was blown up on 35, released that way, and then put back on video and released. So it is the first shot on video film. But the reason Sledgehammer, I think, gets the notoriety is I believe it was actually released before Boarding House. Let's quick do an IMDb check here.
Already there. Boarding House was officially released, according to IBM, on January 14th in 1983. And Sledgehammer doesn't have its release date.
It says 1983. So we're talking about two films that essentially came out almost exactly at the same time.
Pretty much.
So, but in weird ways, they are similar. And in weird ways, they couldn't be further apart if they tried. David A. Pryor, if you guys aren't familiar, is well known as being a Z-grade action schlock director. Him and his brother, Ted Pryor, made the immortal Rambo ripoff Deadly Prey.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, quite frankly, one of the most hilarious fucking movies ever produced in the entire world and entire annals of cinema. At some point, I would love to do an Astro Radio Z episode on Deadly Prey. I'm not going to talk about the sequel that they made before David Pryor died a number of years ago, Deadliest Prey. If you want to hear my thoughts on that, go to Junk Food Dinner. I did an episode with those boys where I picked that movie and regretted it because it's terrible. It's awful. But at some point, I think we'll do an episode on Deadly Prey because it's one of my favorite films of all time. But tonight, we're going to be talking about David Pryor's first film, his first shot on video horror film, which is a slasher film, Sledgehammer. Now, Mark, did you know anything about this going in?
Absolutely nothing. I like a lot of these shot on video. I maybe recognize the name, but I knew nothing about this film.
So, having said that, have you been familiar with David Pryor's work prior to this?
Well, Deadly Prey, yeah. We watched that like one night when we were just binging movies on Rabbit. So I think that's the one that I recognize for sure.
Well, you've probably seen like the Future Force, Death Chase, Killer Workout is another one that he's done.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking down his pedigree here. They're ones that I have run across on cable in that when I was young. And watched a few of these. Jungle Assault, I think. Rapid Fire. Yeah, Future Force. Yep, I've seen some of these. I didn't realize it was him because back in the day, I didn't really notice the names too much. I was just like, oh, look at this. Cheesy.
Well, and they also always, they could have had millions of pseudonyms that they went under. I mean, a lot of the Italian dudes always had pseudonyms, had like 4 or 5 different names. And I'm not sure if Pryor ever did, but it wouldn't have surprised me if his movies would have been released under different names at all. I mean, that's just the kind of thing that happened.
Yeah, well, they didn't necessarily want their names attached to it, or they're doing something completely different than they've got a rep for, so... or, Alan Smithy. So there you go.
Well, I don't know if David Pryor ever was necessarily embarrassed of any of the things he did. He definitely embraced the fact that he made low budget exploitation. He didn't really dive into horror all that much. I mean, Sledgehammer is definitely one of the harder films that he had made. And it was the first one. And I think the only reason, if you listen to the commentary track, because Sledgehammer was kind of lost to obscurity for a long time. And then Intravision put out this insanely awesome DVD a number of years ago that had like 3 commentary tracks. One commentary track with David Pryor before he died, in which he basically, I mean, the person that got him to do the commentary track almost had to like goad him into actually talking about the goddamn movie. It is one of the weirdest commentary tracks where the guy's asking him questions like, I don't know, man. I don't remember doing any of this.
Oh, Jesus.
You're asking me 20 years later. I have no idea what happened on set. And then eventually, by pestering the son of a bitch, he started like talking about it. And this movie was produced. He wanted to become a director, and he made this film a horror film just because he knew it would have a really easy pop and be sold very easily within the stores, because at the time there was a slasher craze. You had the Jasons, you had the Halloweens, and you had all of the subsequent knockoffs that were happening, the prom nights and all that shit. So David Pryor figured, what would be the easiest way for me to get into the film business than making a cheap slasher film? And if there is a plot that could be discerned from Sledgehammer, which is quite frankly one of the most unique slasher films you'll probably ever see, mostly because if you put it on double speed, it would play out in real time. But we'll get to that later. It's the story about this young boy who is locked in a closet while his mom is attempting to get her freak on. She's having an affair with a dude and also a married dude. And they go away to this house that's in the middle of the woods, this red house. And she brings her 8-year-old kid for some unknown fucking reason and says, "You little son of a bitch, get in that goddamn closet. I don't want to hear a damn word out of you." And just like the mother of the year. And locks him in this closet. And then she proceeds to go out with Mr. Don Juan in a silk, smoking vest. And they start kissing and rubbing each other and telling each other how glad they're fucking over their spouses, and how they put the little brat in the closet and they're ready to get their fuck on. And all of a sudden, the little brat comes out and smashes the dude in the back of the head with a sledgehammer and pummels them both into fucking piles of goo.
Well, you don't know it's the kid for sure.
Oh, who else is it, Mark?
I don't know. There's a supernatural element in here, so who the hell knows?
It wasn't, but at that point in the film, which this is just the prologue.
That's true.
There is no supernatural element to this movie whatsoever. It's kind of just setting up the history of what the killer, who we'll just call Sledgehammer, because in the credits he's just listed as killer,
sure,
but you might as well just call him Sledgehammer. What his backstory is, so that when he gets introduced into the film later, you kind of understand the pathos behind why he's doing these things, if there's even a possibility of explaining that kind of thing with this movie. So anyways, fast forward 10 years, and there's a group of quote unquote teenagers, more like college students, that are on the far end of the college spectrum. I mean, these are obviously 30-year-olds, like all of them. Every single last one of them. There's like 3 or 4 couples. The dudes are all ripped and shredded, obviously jocks, and the girls are all trim and fit and sexy. And they go out to this cabin, this red house, in order to have a party. And eventually, at one point, the lead male of the group, Ted Pryor, David Pryor's brother, who would subsequently be the star of Deadly Prey, the guy who ran around in cut off jean shorts and, oiled up chest, killing random people in the middle of the woods. He's mostly shirtless in this entire movie. He decides in the midst of, food fights and pouring alcohol all over each other, that they need to hold a seance. And which is, as we've discussed in the past, Mark, is always the best idea when you're having a party, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, when I get together with friends in a location that has a reputation of having some kind of mysterious killer, I just want to have a seance because I gotta know what the spirits know.
Yeah, I gotta bring that dude back because he's got some goofy ass shit and stories to tell, right?
Well, yeah, and I think he's also he likes staring at the house for a long time because we get some really freaking long establishing shots. throughout this movie. I'm sorry. That, you know, you're happy the seance is happening because something is happening. But yeah, you know.
Yeah. Well, this is a defining trait, and we'll get into this more after we finally get through this plot synopsis, which I'm surprised is taking me so long because there's really no plot to this thing. A defining trait of Sledgehammer is that the vast majority of it takes place in slow motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to break your plot synopsis.
You're not. Don't feel sorry. I mean, this is an important point we need to bring up, Mark. This movie is an hour and 24 minutes long, and a good 50% of this movie is played out at half speed.
Is this? Oh.
So all this plot that I'm describing literally takes place over the course of the entire film. And it's just a bunch of people go out into this cabin. They hold a seance. Then all of a sudden, the Sledgehammer killer comes back, starts popping all over the house like Jason Goes to Manhattan for some unknown reason, and kills them all off with a sledgehammer. It is one of the weirdest fucking movies I've ever seen, mostly not because of the plot or the conceit, but because of how it's made and how it plays out. It's a very odd duck. So, Mark, having said all of this, finally watching Sledgehammer, what did you think?
It's an odd duck, that's for sure. That's one way to put it. I was like, one of the things, though, I got while watching this, though, is I saw other shot on video and B films that would come out later after this film. I saw them in this movie. Mm-hmm. So I was looking at it going, oh, man, those people watched this film. I mean, video violence. I'm going in there, but I believe it was it video violence or violent shit? No, violent shit. I'm sorry. The one where the kids gets locked in the closet in the beginning.
Yep.
I'm like sitting here watching this film going, I've seen this before. This exact dialogue, this exact scene of a mom shoving a kid in a closet, only there's no demon in the closet this time, giving him a mask.
No, it's just an awful fucking mom.
Just an awful fucking mom. But I'm sitting here watching going, holy crap. And then, I'm going to bring it up, and I know it'll probably raise some hairs for you, but I'm watching this, and when the kids get together, Dad, I'm like, holy crap, the people who made Axum had to have watched this.
Okay, I knew this was going to come up, Mark. I knew at some point, because I thought the exact same thing. There's this sequence in the midst of this middle section where we have the prologue, where it explains the backstory of Sledgehammer, and then this whole middle sequence of the film, which takes up probably a good 50 to 60% of the movie, where these people are just partying, and for some reason they're obviously 35 years old, but still feel that it's a good idea to pour beer all over each other's heads
and mustard.
And mustard. Like anybody likes that shit at all. But there's a sequence at a dinner table that lasts forever, and all I could think about was flashbacks to Axum. And I was just like, I wonder if Mark's going to bring Axum up.
Yep. It's the exact feeling I got when I'm watching this. I'm watching this going, holy crap, this is Axum. I'm like, this dinner scene is Axum. The only thing that's missing is that, they've got bread and hot dogs or whatever and beer versus, chicken dinner. But It's pretty much the exact same type of feel. I mean, the audio and the way it's shot and everything, I'm just like, wow. But yeah, watching this, I picked up bits and pieces where I could see other films borrowed from this movie. So there's a lot of interesting ideas. And like you said, odd ideas that you could see the influence if you've watched enough of these, which you've taken me on this journey so far, and I'm picking up on it. I'm like, yeah, with this being one of the first ones, you can see how people borrowed ideas from this one, and I just love, though, the fact that we get that opening bit with him getting in the closet and everything. And about, half an hour later, or it was 40 minutes later, whatever they do the seance, we get the exact same. I mean,
yeah, I thought the same thing, Mark. It's just like, oh shit, we're padding now. We're watching the entire intro again.
I thought at least, maybe they show a clip, it'd be like an abridged version of it. Like, okay, no, it's the exact same opening clip.
It's the entire fucking scene almost.
It is. Like, oh man, really?
Well, that is a major complaint I think a lot of shot on video fans have, or most people that watch Sledgehammer, is that nothing happens for the vast majority of this movie. And the reason is because I think he shot it so quickly. I think it was shot in 7 days.
Wow.
And he only shot the bare essentials. And then I'm sure when he got into the post aspect of this film, it was like, oh man, I only have a 45-minute film. What the fuck am I going to do? Let's make everything slow fucking motion. So there's pluses and minuses to that decision. The minuses are the entire middle section of this movie. Because you're hanging out with a ton of, stock characters that aren't acting like kids, are trying to act like kids, obviously are in their 30s, and are obnoxious beyond belief, non-actors. And you're dragging these sequences in which they're talking about just nothing, just absolutely nothing, out to the breaking point. Because there's sequences like Ted Pryor goes there, he's there with his girlfriend, and they're kind of in the midst of relationship turmoil, because I think at one point he had asked her to get married, and now he's getting cold feet, and she's kind of confused as to what's going on. And he's like, babe, I still love you. I just am a little confused right now and want to get my head on straight and make sure we're doing the right thing.
He was speaking for the audience, because I had no idea what that was about. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off, but I'm just...
No, I can totally understand that.
I just watched that segment, and with the audio too, I'm just like, what? What does he need to get his head around? What are you talking? Why are we sitting on these two, and what are they talking about? Okay, we'll get to it later. And we never get to it later.
Nope. It's a total, like, they have that little moment, and then they proceed to walk around the house, because there's characters that go up to him and go, hey, I just want to check this place out and make sure it's on the up and up. I'm going to go walk the perimeter. I'll be back. And the one guy who looks like a linebacker for the Oakland Raiders back in the day, walks around the house in slow motion. Ted Pryor and then his girlfriend proceed to then have a tall grass slow motion sequence where they walk together with real light piano music playing, in which he essentially pulls her hair. She almost spills her beer, and then he puts her in a half Nelson almost. It's like, what the fuck is this? And it goes on for like 10 minutes. The slow motion sequence of them just walking. This is a perfect example of what half of this movie is.
I love the random, you talk about the linebacker guy. I love the random, no purpose whatsoever journey into the tool shed.
It has this ominous music playing.
There's this ominous music playing, and he's in the tool shed, and he finds something, but it's not shot good enough to where you can really tell what he finds. And he's pulling on it because it's stuck under this table, and you still don't know what it is. And as he pulls it, it gets blurry, and they freeze frame and go to black, and you're like, "What the fuck was that?"
You know what it was?
The sledgehammer?
Yes, it was the sledgehammer. Okay. But you would never fucking know. You would never fucking know. Because there's a huge sting, and then it goes to the next scene, and you're like, what the fuck was that?
You don't get to see him pull it out or even look at what he pulled out. You just, boom. And so you get this blurry of this heavy guy and some kind of thing he pulled out from under the table. And you go to the next scene. You're like, wait, what was...
Well, that's because this movie, it doesn't give you any explanation as to what happened after that opening prologue. You have no idea what happened to the kid. All you know is that the parents, or not the parents, the mom and the lover were totally smashed to bits in a pretty gratuitously violent sequence. I mean, when the kid smashes that dude in the back of the head, his skull caves in and brains come out. It's fucking awesome.
It is.
It looks pretty fucking awesome. But then after that, there's no explanation, so you don't really know what happened. Is the kid still there? Is he grown up? But it doesn't seem that way. It seems more like there's an ominous supernatural presence within this building. And the reason you have that feeling is because, and this is a big part of why I think ultimately this movie works for me. I don't know. We'll get to whether or not you ultimately liked this later. I don't want to know yet, Mark.
Okay.
But why this movie works for me is this score that is played over this. If this movie did not have this really dark, kind of droney score that plays over it, this would literally be one of the most boring movies ever. There's no doubt, because there's no indication at any point that any of this, we should feel anything towards any of this, because the vast majority of the movie, as I said, is a bunch of idiots that you don't care about, just kind of acting like they're kids on a getaway, I guess. I mean, let's go ahead and talk about the characters in this movie. You have these three couples, and then this drag along friend of theirs. There's always got to be one dude that doesn't have, an accomplice, doesn't have a woman with him.
Yeah.
So he's always the third wheel.
It's always the odd man out. You need that one odd man out. So.
Yep. You need that odd man out. The dudes, for some reason, are obviously all jocks. They're ripped. I mean, these guys are fucking built. They're always partying with each other. And the women are always like, hey, I'm here. Aren't you going to fuck me?
Yeah.
I mean, they don't say that, but it's essentially what's going on.
No, they do say that. The girlfriend of Dime Store Lionel Richie, for crying out loud. They never establish why he won't get into bed with this blonde who's pretty much throwing herself at him. And you're like, are they playing an angle that he's got the hots for like one of the guys or something? All I know is that hair is perfect. And what, does he not want to mess it up? I don't know. But it took her for like ever apparently to bed this guy. And I'm like,
well, did you get, and I mean, we could be reading pretty deep into this. Did you get the underlying theme that potentially this movie is really about closeted homosexuality?
Oh yeah, I got that tone. I will say there are a few scenes in here where I got that kind of vibe from it, because the guys are, we all have buddies who are really close to and all, but these guys seem really close. And yeah, you've got the killer coming out of the closet at one point, but and he seems to take out the guys first as well, which I guess is a good strategy. But yeah, I don't think we're reading too much into it. There is an undertone of that thought or that possible theme going on with these, because you've got Dime Store Lionel Richie, who for some reason, who we never learn, just was really hesitant of getting, he doesn't say, oh, I'm saving myself for marriage or whatnot. He just for some reason will not get with her. And apparently we learned through dialogue in a scene that really served no purpose outside of getting the women in their underwear. It was after the food fight,
which I'm sure you were really disappointed.
I was. I'm like, what? You set up the food fight specifically just to get these women in their underwear, didn't you? Anyway, so they have a discussion about
Ted Pryor fucking pours that whole thing of mustard all over her head. I would have been so fucking pissed off.
I'm like sitting there going, this is not realistic. She would have left. She would have called him a number of names and just walked out. I'm like, damn. But they're having that discussion about sex and we got our middle girl who's like, oh, well, and then the other one's like, yeah, I can't even get to second base. And then you got the one who's saying, oh, he is, all the time. And I'm just like sitting here going, yeah, but none of the guys really at any point in this film, you truly feel like they have emotions towards these ladies. At all,
or even have any sexual chemistry with them.
Yeah, any type of romantical, emotional, or sexual chemistry with any of these ladies. It felt like they were all just a group of friends and no one was really a couple. And in fact, there were a few times where I'm sitting there going, wait, is she with him or him? I'm not sure because we never really established that. This guy's being a kind of an ass to her, but he's got his arm around her. So maybe they're a couple, but I'm not sure because it's never really established at all anywhere where the dynamic was of the group. And so all you knew was the guys were really buddy, especially Ted Pryor and the odd man out, who end up staging the seance and which ended up being a joke, if you will, a prank, a la like April Fool's Day type of thing.
Or Friday the 13th Part 2 or
right.
Any number of other fucking slasher movies.
Right. And you find that, but the way he's broken up over dude, finding the blood and dude getting killed in that, I'm like, wow. I'm like, man.
I really think there's something to be said about this, and it's, I don't want to diminish the fact that Sledgehammer, a cheap shot on video horror slasher film, has subtext to it. Okay. I really don't know if it was 100% intentional or if it was just so inherent in the slasher formula that all of these movies tend to be about repressed sexuality and violence due to it. Mm-hmm. In the beginning of the film, where the little boy is shunned and thrown in a closet so that the parents, the adults, can get their fuck on, for him to then translate that energy into violence and murder. Then we have a group of people that, for some unknown reason, as we've described, the boys want to hang out with the boys and not the girls the whole time. And the women are frustrated and almost pushed into a closet until one of the boys releases a killer hell-bent on smashing people with his huge phallic sledgehammer. Mm-hmm. Nothing going on here, folks.
Nope.
So, but I really think slashers in general, the vast majority of the theme of any of them, in maybe, I know that the vast majority of people that were making them weren't trying to make sexual allegories. They weren't trying to make metaphor type films, but it's inherent in the formula.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's always some dude with something looking to penetrate into something else. Mm-hmm. That is what a slasher movie essentially ends up becoming. So anyways, so we can get past all of this nonsense of dudes having contests about shoving entire sandwiches into their mouth and shotgunning beers and having amazing Lionel Richie mustaches and all this other nonsense. They have this seance and they bring back the Sledgehammer killer. Now, from this point in the movie on, all bets are off, and this becomes one of the strangest, most stream of conscious, like weird fever dreams of a movie that you're likely to see not only in the shot on video realm, but in horror in general. Mark, when it started, when the Sledgehammer killer came back, did you like the direction that they took, where this confined space that they were in, this house, ends up almost becoming a labyrinth for some unknown reason? Because the killer comes back and he's not really a corporal being. He is kind of a ghost, a spirit that's transporting itself from room to room and changing the layout of the house to confuse its guests and making people teleport within rooms and confusing them, like almost like there was a rift in time and space and he brought those people into it. What did you think of how this was handled and how it broke free of the traditional slasher kind of formula?
Well, it surprised me, especially in a film like this, because it's a chance, it surprised me. I'm like, oh, we're doing a supernatural angle on it. I did not expect it. I expected, older kid to show up. I figured because when they say, oh, they never found him, I'm like, oh, okay. So, he's coming back, years later, he's been hiding out in the house or whatnot. But then, he did the first teleport thing or teleport in. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. And then the sledgehammer's there and then it fades away. And suddenly, you see a kid, you see the kid rather than an adult. And then there's the adult. It's like, wow, this thing just went totally, like you said, stream of conscious in a good way. I liked that. I liked the fact that it surprised me and that they were trying to do something with this film that you didn't quite expect, especially for something from that time. And it took a little bit of thought. Like you said, I'm glad I'm not the only one who thought that the house, it was hard to establish where people were actually in the house because, it seemed like, wait, oh, they've been downstairs the whole time? What?
Well, the reasoning for that is, I think, was a conscious choice on David Pryor's part, because this entire movie was shot in his apartment.
Okay.
So in order for this movie to feel like it was in a house and it was bigger than it actually was, I think he decided to get creative. And very thankfully so, because the last part of this film where it becomes the horror film is really strange and unlike just about anything out there. And it's what makes me come back to this movie. The middle section of this movie is garbage. I mean, it is boring, fucking garbage. But once it turns into a slasher film at the end, the combination of the score, it's going to be funny that I'm going to say this, but the way this was shot, in the stock it was shot, he paid professional DPs to come out and shoot this stuff on this video stock. And there's a softness to this that lends an air to a more dreamlike state. And as you said, the sledgehammer comes out. He's this huge hulking form with this translucent mask that makes his face look all fucked up, like he's almost laughing and smiling, and he's silent the entire time. But he's this hulking individual that obviously is at least 6'7" or above. I mean, this dude is humongous, and he's just fading in and out of scenes. Rooms are switching, people are falling and then transporting into other rooms. All of a sudden, walls will come up with blood with pentagrams on them, and there'll be an altar with people dead on it. Then that'll fade away, and then other bodies will pop up all over the place. You don't know minute to minute what's going to happen. All you know is you have this really ominous score that it is so full of dread that this entire last 20 minutes of this movie is some of my favorite stuff in all of shot on video horror. It is such a weird duck. I mean, did it work for you at all, Mark?
Yeah, it worked. And like you said, I think it's partly because that middle part, it's such a difference from the middle part of this film where it is pretty much just padding and we're working this out to a feature. It is. It worked for me. I like I said, I dug it. I dug the originality of it. Unexpectedness. I liked. It surprised me they involved the kid within it as much as they did. Especially that one scene where the kid is he's back in the same outfit as the big guy was, and he's standing over the next to the dead body. And it's got stab wound. He's stabbing it, and just a little underlying level of evil to it that that really worked, because they mixing between the kid and the tall guy really worked and helped get this idea across, I think, of what he was trying to go for with this killer and its motivation and everything. And yeah, it worked for me. Like I said, I was almost ready to check kind of out of the film, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, here we go.
You wait nearly 50 minutes for anything to happen in this goddamn movie, so I can understand. This is one of those movies most people aren't going to get into. Just plain and simple. It's just too slow. The vast majority of people that I've shown this to have checked out halfway through. Mm-hmm. Because it's just like, even when it gets really good, it's still so much of it is in slow motion. So much. But the thing is, it's edited really well. And that's what saves this movie ultimately. And I can't stress this enough. And yes, I'm biased. Editing is so essential and so key that a movie like this that doesn't have a hell of a lot going for it, as we've described, the vast majority of it is a bunch of fucking idiots hanging out, pouring beer all over each other, acting like knobs. But when it needs to, this movie is surprisingly effective. It's got great gore, and it's mostly done in cuts. Like when he hits people with sledgehammers, there's a cut there that makes the impact feel visceral, in which obviously he's not going to, this is a no budget movie. He's not going to be hitting people with a real fucking sledgehammer. What a deadly weapon to use. Seriously, you could really fuck someone up. And there's a few scenes where obviously there's punches pulled, and David Pryor's having this epic struggle with the sledgehammer guy, which is totally ludicrous. But when all is said and done, I always walk away liking the fact that the final act of this movie really kind of like saves the entire thing. So if I were to say anything about this, I would recommend this for the most part for those of you out there that are in not only into slasher movies, like really weird, abstract, dark movies. And it's weird to say that because this is a really formulaic type of film, but that final act is just so goddamn bonkers and so fucking out of nowhere that it's unique. And it's not going to be like your typical dude walking around a fucking hospital with a knife, cutting people up. It's not that kind of movie. I would recommend it, and especially if you're really into shot on videos. If you haven't seen this, I'm really shocked if you're into shot on videos, because this is one of the granddaddies. We're going through a lot of the granddaddies, like the big ones here, to start off with. I think as the year goes on later, we'll start getting into some of the more obscure stuff. But I think for us to start off and for us to sit and have these conversations about shot on video horror films, we need to talk about these bigger films, the more well-known. It's funny saying Sledgehammer's a bigger film because it's one of the most obscure horror movies you're probably going to talk about. But when it comes to shot on video horror, it's very well known because it's one of the first. And unfortunately, it was lost to obscurity for so many years that I think it just fell out of the public's consciousness. And it's unfortunate. So I would wholeheartedly recommend Sledgehammer. Which is weird because I said most of it sucks, but I still think it's, as a shot on video horror film, it's one of the essentials you need to check out. So Mark, when all is said and done, how do you come out on this thing? Did you end up liking it? Did you end up not liking it? Would you recommend it? I mean, what do you got to say?
The third act really did save it for me. It made it worth the trip because I was going to sit there and go, okay, as I said, we've kind of seen this before in movies, and those movies kind of took the more traditional route in the end of predictability, and this one didn't. So I would recommend it to anyone who is interested in shot on video horror, definitely to look at this one, and also, those making, micro budget, no budget films are interested in it. Look at this film because, while a lot of it is padding, especially that third act where it actually gets into the horror, which is the part where it's one of those films where you get that feeling like this is where they wanted to get to.
Yeah, right. The entire time.
There's some of those films where I'm like, okay, this whole movie, the first half was to get to this part. This is what they really wanted to do, but they didn't want to just jump right into this. Because I've watched films like that before too. We're going, oh, you did this whole thing specifically for this series of scenes, didn't you? You get mic shadows in there. You get dialogue. You can tell some of the scenes were ad-libbed.
I think a lot of those scenes, especially like that dining room table scene and the beer drinking scene where they're partying, that's all ad-libbed. Oh, yeah. It's gotta be.
Although I do like the one guy who, for some reason, these kids come out in this van. I'm sorry to break away for a minute, but I have to bring up, they come out in this van that looks like it's from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And it's like a clown car van because they just keep pulling stuff out of this van and all these people unpile. But it's not, it must be not their van, or it is their van, but they randomly have given it to this old guy who's going to take it. And he says, and I quote, "I'll have your transmission shifting gears like a woman on her honeymoon night."
I loved that line.
And he drives away and you never see, I'm like, who is that guy? Like, this is their van, but he's driving away. Okay, whatever, So, I mean, you get stuff like that in the beginning, but it really is a setup for this last act, which if you watch this film, I would recommend it to those who are like those indie budget, low budget horror as well, because you can see a lot of influence that this film had on later filmmakers just a few years later, not only in shot on video, but in horror in general. You could tell some of these, which directors in that have seen this film because they borrowed from it. And that, I think, for that appreciation alone, it's worth a watch. You got to get through that first chunk. Don't get me wrong. That's rough. It is rough. But the payoff in the end, you'll see a lot of things where you're going, whoa, okay, they went there. Didn't expect that.
Well, let's be honest. I mean, while we're saying that subsequent films would kind of lift from this a little bit, this lifts from a lot of films.
Oh, yeah.
There's no doubt. I mean, there's Halloween throughout this. There's Friday the 13th throughout this. I mean, this is by no means an original piece of work.
No, not at all. But I think this showed people of lower budget films what they could do, and they could still get away with that to what the theatrical films were getting, were doing. And they could still pull it off if they took a little time in that. So, I fully saw where it borrowed from stuff too. Like I mentioned, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And some of the other shots that in here, you can see where they were going for it. But it's a unique, odd, film that if you're looking for unique and unusual early films, this is one you want to watch because it's definitely different from a good chunk of the pack that's out there.
Yeah, totally. And it's relatively easy to get. I don't think it's gone out of print yet, but you can find Intravision put it out on DVD a number of years ago. I have it on my shelf. It is totally worth it if you can get it. Awesome presentation, lots of extra features, lovingly put together. This is the best you'll ever see this goddamn movie. And for a shot on video horror film, man, it's quite shocking. Now, we didn't even talk about the weird toasted effects that are throughout this movie, like the intro credit sequence.
Yes, the toasted effects. I was going to say, which is unusual because I was going to bring up the fact that it surprised me the title was practical.
That is one of my favorite title screens of all time.
It was great because you get these toaster shots and that of the characters, and it's where I saw Michael Shanahan, but then I realized it's not that Michael Shanahan.
Well, and there's also a John Eastman. Yeah. Oh, not that John Eastman.
Right. But I'm like, they're doing the toaster effects and graphics. And I'm like, okay. And then he gets to Sledgehammer and I'm watching that and I'm like, there's something that looks a little different to it. And then you find out it's actually a carved title of Sledgehammer because a sledgehammer comes out of nowhere and smashes it. And I'm like, holy crap.
Yeah, it's definitely like a foam core sculpture of the word sledgehammer, and it's done very crudely, almost like it's caveman, like the way that it looks, and it's just dripping with blood. There's like blood cascading over it. And when it hits, it's that, again, the score of this movie is awesome. I've heard people complain that they didn't like it, but for me, it sets the tone and makes this movie so much. And without that music, man, this movie would suck. Yeah. It would suck hard.
The music definitely adds to the atmosphere that is lacking visually.
I'll definitely play some of that as we go out here for the episode. I'll play some of that music because it's awesome. I love the music, the soundtrack to this. I mean, it's typical synthesizer shot on video stuff. So, but anyway, so 2 thumbs up. I was kind of on the fence here, Mark. I didn't know if you were going to really get into this at all.
Like you said, it was the third act. It was going off the rails. I'm always out there for originality stuff. And it surprises people sometimes. Like a little side note, I was on a podcast I was invited on with a group of younger critics and such, all great guys, but we were going through kind of our top 10 from last year. And when I gave an honorable mention to Kuso, and then I mentioned,
they called you a pervert immediately.
I know. I go, honorable mention to Kuso, and they're like, Kuso, what's that? And then I hear clicking and someone looking and like, I'm watching the trailer now. Oh my God. I'm like, I like films that they're making it to make it, and they don't care about whatever it does to the audience. Another top film like last year at the top of my list, though, one of them, because we all know how I am with making lists, but one of the top was Mother, which was also another one of those films where people just hated that film.
Dude, my brother got a hold of me tonight. He texted me, "Did you see this Mother movie?" And all I texted him was, "I own it." And he's like, "Did somebody dare you? Did you lose a bet?" It's just one of those kinds of movies. I agree.
Yeah. So, I always like unusual. I always appreciate when filmmakers are just decide to do something unusual. And this ending, this last act, we can't talk about it enough, is something that you don't see, or we haven't really seen out of the other shot on videos stuff that you've brought to me. It really goes in a direction where you're like, they're trying to kind of do their own thing here, and their own mythology and everything. And I got to give them props for it. It was very interesting to see how they pull this off, and they pull it off well. It's some of the best stuff in the film is in the end. And it's the stuff, like I said before, I think they really wanted to get to because they had that planned out, I think.
Yeah, it's cool shit, dude. Definitely cool shit. So, having said that, let's look on to what next month's, because I think we decided, Mark, you and I decided that once a month we're going to be doing another shot on video horror film.
Yeah.
It looks like, Mark, next month, the shot on video horror film we're going to be covering and we're going to be watching is Gourmet Zombie Chef from Hell. Now, have you seen this?
I may have, actually. This title sounds very familiar. I'll know more when I start seeing it. But it's one I remember seeing very prominently on the shelves because of that iconic cover.
Oh, the cover is fucking awesome.
The cover is just freaking awesome. Yeah, I think I've seen this before, but I'm not sure. I'll know more when I watch it, because this is one I think I might have seen, if anything, because of the cover. So
awesome. Well, that's how most people saw any of this shit, and which is shocking to me that anyone would see Sledgehammer, because its cover is kind of crap, to be honest.
Yeah, but
it looks like some kid drew the cover for Sledgehammer.
But Gourmet Zombie Chef Rebel has one of the best covers. I mean, to see that on the video shelf, it was like, yeah.
Yeah. Why do you think it's remembered? Because everyone rented that goddamn thing. So that's what we're going to be talking about next month here on Astro Radio Z, Mark the Movie Man and I, on the Shot on Video series. So this is the portion of the show, folks, where my guest shamelessly shows the fuck out of you, Mr. Mark the Movie Man. Go ahead and show.
Okay, I was chill. Thanks once again, Derek. This is always a fun journey to go through these Shot on Videos of films, ones that I didn't quite venture out when I was younger, and now I'm kicking myself for some of these. So you can find me on specialmarkproductions.com is where the main stop is, where you can go from there to my YouTube page, Special Mark Prod, or I'm on Twitters at Special Mark Pro, Instagram, all the social media stuff. But if you go to specialmarkproductions.com, you go from there, you can find all my stuff, my podcast, my Final Cut episodes. And soon I'm going to be putting a page up there with some of the shorts that I have on my YouTube. You can find them on that website. And yeah, I've got some other things in the hopper I'm working on. So
awesome. Always excited to have you on the show, Mark. I love doing these Shot on Video episodes with you, mostly because I love Shot on Video horror, and being able to sit and revisit this stuff always puts a smile on my face. So I totally appreciate you doing this with me every single month. And folks, if you like this show and you want to hear more of it, head over to our Patreon page. For $1 a month, you get bonus episodes with me and Mark the Movie Man. Usually a lot more filthy, if you can imagine, than these Astro Radio Z episodes, and it's a lot more freeform. And for $5 a month, you get video episodes. I just put my first vlog up there. Can you believe that?
Oh my Lord,
Mark!
Derek,
I did a vlog.
You did a vlog?
I did a vlog.
Wow, and the world is still here. Holy crap!
It was one of the weirdest experiences I've ever had. It made me feel very dirty. Even during it, I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what this is. I've never done this. This is very strange. If that wasn't a seller, folks, for $5, you get to see me languish and squirm over there, but also for other videos and stuff like that. So go over to the Patreon. It's very minuscule amount of money. Go ahead if you want to contribute. There's almost 45 episodes now sitting there in the back catalog for you to peruse and enjoy. So anyways, until our next episode, folks, have a good one. I'll talk to you later.
You can find Astro Radio Z on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, Google Play, YouTube, and anywhere podcasts are found. Please help us by subscribing, rating the show, and giving us a review. It helps us get the show out to more listeners. Also, if you would like to hear more of the show and be a more active participant, join the Astro Radio Z Facebook group and page, and join the Patreon. For only $1 a month, you get bonus episodes. Thank you for listening. See you next week, Astro Zombies.